One of the teachers at my high school used to be a trucker back in 2010, and this was around the time before he became a teacher later on in 2012. He has done his hours as a trucker, and most of the time he did the night shifts, which involves him going from point A to point B. Eventually, being a trucker meant there was a lot of opportunities to drive from point A to point B, different countries, but however, in different states as well. This had, I'm going to keep this teacher's name anonymous, but let's just say his name was Bill. Bill was in his 40s and he had worked as a trucker for the last 5 years as he's a retired veteran, so it made sense for him to start easy by getting a job as a trucker. Most of the time when it comes to being a trucker, there was a lot of strange and weird encounters that he had, like from homeless people all drugged up, from not knowing to where they are, to pretty much seeing anything really weird. Bill was at the gas station and he was pretty much fueling up his truck. It was around midnight and most of the places were pretty much dead at this point. As he was fueling up his truck, he ended up coming over to the gas station to pay when, of course, with his fuel card, he already paid that, but he decided to go grab a beer. As he did that, there was this one guy who was standing behind his truck. Honestly, this man looked like maybe he was in his 20s. He wore a hoodie and he kind of looked like your typical old teenager just wandering around. Bill ended up looking over and he said to the guy, "Has he been here before?" And the employee said, "He's actually been here multiple times, so it's not very surprising." As he said this, Bill goes out to try to see if he can ask the guy or the teenager or whatever. Even though he was in his 20s, he assumed that it was a teenager because of the way he looked, to ask if there was anything he needed. Obviously, this man looked over and he ended up taking off. Honestly, Bill was confused as to who that man was, but as he pulled out, there was no one there. He didn't see anybody, so he honestly had no idea who that man was, but he still has not figured out that time. He quit being a trucker back in 2011 because he gets paranoia that whoever that man was probably someone trying to pull something sneaky. Now, Bill's not sure if this guy is still around or not, but he liked to think that maybe be this guy, if he is really insane, would get the help that he needs. Now, to give a bit of background information, this actually happened at least 4 or 5 years ago. This happened to a friend of mine who used to be a trucker, which we'll call him by the name Connor. Connor was in his 30s and he had been a trucker for the last 2 years and he didn't mind this job. Being the night owl he was, he usually drives pretty much most of the night and go from point A to point B. Most of the time his life as a trucker was delivering goods to those in the area, such as businesses like Best Buy, etc. However, as he was driving down the road to get to one city, he ended up seeing that there was some figure standing in the middle of the road. Luckily, he didn't hit the person, but pulled over as soon as the headlights revealed to be a person. As soon as Connor pulled to the side, he ended up getting out, carrying his gun just for defensive purposes, in case of this figure was definitely some insane person trying to attack. He goes over towards a woman, and what appeared to be her, maybe in her mid-20s. She honestly looked down and didn't even resemble anybody. Honestly, he really looked up. As soon as this woman did, she ended up telling him to stay away. Honestly, he didn't understand why that woman was saying stuff like this, but asked her if she could calm down and explain to him about what happened. Honestly, this woman couldn't say anything, and that's when she ends up running back the way she came, probably towards the woods. As Connor looked, he could see that there was few masked people hiding in the bushes. Connor really got back in his truck and drove off, and he soon drove off and, of course, made it to the town. After delivering goods to those big companies, he was considering going to the police, but however, with that being said, there was a high chance that those people could be gone by now. Connor is still not sure if this woman had something to do with leading him to a trap or if it was something much worse. It still scares him to this day of what this woman was doing, but he suspected there could have been some pretty much a literal ambush waiting to happen. If Connor ended up taking a few more steps, honestly, he's not even sure if he would be still around today. He's still not sure if there was something about those men or not, but there definitely was some form of really weird, abnormal stuff that he has encountered. But this one was probably just an unexpected ambush waiting to happen. This was about maybe a few years ago, and it happened to one of my dad's friends at the time. At the time, we'll call him by the name Barry, and Barry had been a trucker for about a couple years now. It was a most exhausting but rewarding jobs, and Barry had gone out of country a few times doing these kind of things. However, one of the times he did encounter was something really odd. He was driving through Michigan as he was delivering something to a state known as Nevada. Of course, it was going to be a couple days worth of a drive, but he still managed to do it. However, when he was in Michigan, I don't remember what city he was driving through or what highway he was on. But as he was driving on the highway, there was surrounded by forest when all of a sudden he saw that there was a man. In the distance, this man seemed to be maybe in his mid 40s, and he had his thumb sticking out. It seemed to be that this guy was some sort of pretty much hitchhiking or hitchhiker. So Barry pulls over and asks the man if he needs a ride, and the man says, "Yeah, can you get me to my girlfriend, please?" Of course, Barry asked him where his girlfriend was, and he got in the truck and he drove for another couple miles. Honestly, while the drive was going on, Barry started to get uncomfortable with this man. He started making really weird gestures, looking at him with some sort of evil entity inside of him. Honestly, Barry felt unsettled. He didn't even know if this guy was dangerous or not. Take it, he had seen a couple dangerous people nearby, so honestly, it wasn't surprising. As he was driving the truck, he ended up seeing that this man honestly was fidgeting with something in his pocket. That is when Barry said, "Oh, I think your girlfriend's over there." He pulls over and ends up kicking him out. Honestly, the man starts screaming rage at him as soon as Barry starts to take off with his truck. Eventually, he outrun the man, and of course, he did call the cops when he got to the nearest city, but no one could find him. They even went back there, the cops did, to search, but they couldn't even find him anywhere. Barry has no idea why that man wanted to attack him or what his intentions were, but honestly, they weren't good. Barry is not sure if that man was ever caught or not, but in the same time, he would like to think that this man is get caught. But however, what are the chances of that being the case? That is unfortunately unknown. So, one of my friends from high school used to have a parent that used to be a trucker, but of course, that was the other point of the story. When my friend's name, which will caller by the name of Sharon. Sharon's dad used to be a trucker at the time, and back then, when he was a trucker back in 2014, he ended up crossing over some sort of big bridge with big arches. I can't remember where that was, but that was where Sharon, who was living in New York at the time, had. It was around 2014, and Sharon's father was driving on a bridge to get from one state to the other. As he was doing so in New York, he ends up coming across what seemed to be some sort of person. The person on the side of the road looked to be a child no older than 5. Of course, that's when Sharon's dad pulls over and since that there was nobody on the bridge at the time, since it was late at night, Sharon's dad got out to see if the child was okay. The child didn't seem to be acknowledging or knew exactly that he was there, but of course Sharon's dad ended up saying that he's here and asked the child some questions. The child didn't say anything, instead of let out a laugh and then before jumping off the bridge. Just as Sharon's dad went to go see where the child went off to, the child disappeared. There were no traces of it anywhere, and honestly, there was no splash that made at the bottom of the bridge. Sharon's dad ended up asking a couple other truckers if they had gone by that area and knew anything abnormal like that happening. None of them even knew about the situation. Some of them were even confused. Honestly, some people said to Sharon's dad that he was either hallucinating because he wasn't getting enough sleep, or maybe there was something there. Now that Sharon's dad thinks about this now, he could think that maybe one of the truckers were right about maybe him seeing things due to not sleeping. But what also came up in Sharon's dad's mind was that there was something paranormal on the bridge. He never really asked too much questions about that, because honestly, he has no idea why these people were there. Well, not people, but who was that child? Was there like a history behind it? There was no answer, and nothing could be really solved. At this point now, Sharon's dad has not talked about this since, but he still wonders today about who that child was. It still crosses his mind when he thinks about it, but at least then, he has never gone down that route again. He quit being a trucker before moving to Canada the next year, so this was only one of the reasons why he would never become a trucker again. Because of this experience, he kind of has a bit of PTSD due to what had happened. He doesn't even know if this was real, fake, or paranormal, but he really does not know what to think.